Welcome everyone to the Virtual College Exploration STEM Days in partnership with Cachet. This is the Olin College of Engineering information session. So thanks for being here. I'm going to kick us off with some housekeeping items before passing it over to the presenters. We do have more sessions available through tomorrow evening, hosted by Cachet at strivescan.com/virtual/STEM. So we'd love to see you register for more sessions. When you do register for these sessions, you do get a barcode in that confirmation email, but know that that barcode is not necessary for any of the virtual events you participate in. We are recording all sessions and posting them to our website shortly after the session concludes. So whether you want to rewatch a session or watch one you may have missed, just check back on our website for those recordings. And you'll notice that you will see and hear the Olin team. Unfortunately, they cannot see or hear you. This is webinar style format, so any questions you have throughout the presentation, feel free to type those into the Q&A box, and Dan from Olin is going to be monitoring those questions throughout the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Alia to get us started. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you so much to StriveScan and Cachet for hosting us for this event. So welcome, everyone. My name is Alia Georges, and I am the Assistant Director of Admission and Financial Aid Counselor here at Olin College of Engineering. So I will be leading the info session today. We also have, like Jen mentioned, Dan from Olin, who will be monitoring the Q&A. We will have a good amount of time at the end for Q&A, where we'll get to some of your questions out loud. Dan will also be looking at your questions throughout. He may respond to some of you directly, and we'll also have the full Q&A as well after this, so we may follow up through email if we don't get to your question in the session. I also have an Olin student, Olivia Joe, here with me, who will be also speaking at some point, so she will be on here as well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. All right, so I'm just going to start with some of the basics. Since we can't be together in person today, I wanted to start off with a picture of our beautiful campus. So Olin College of Engineering is located in Needham, Massachusetts. That is in the Boston area, and Boston is such a cool place to go to college just because there are so many colleges and universities around here. There's a really cool energy to the city and so many people who are engaged in learning. And Needham is located about 14 miles west of Boston. Another thing to know about Olin is that we are small, but we are mighty. So we have a total student body of just about 330 students. And we'll talk more in a bit about why we are the size that we are. And I also want to point out that within that 330 students, we have a great deal of diversity. So currently we have students representing 38 different US states, 13 different countries. So about 10% of our students are international students. We also have a lot of different racial, ethnic, religious, and socioeconomic backgrounds represented, and about 50% students identify as women, which especially for an engineering school, which tend to be a lot more male dominated, that's something that we are really, really proud of. And then the last thing I'll mention to kick us off is that Olin is all about what we call engineering for the good of the world. That is our mission. So our goal is not just to give you an excellent technical education, but also to take that a step further and give you the tools to be able to apply those technical skills in a wide variety of settings, and to specifically do so in a way where you can have a positive impact on the world around you, however you define that. All right, so we talked a little bit about location. I want to mention that one thing that we love about being in the Boston area is that there are so many other colleges and universities in this area that we can partner with. And one of those partnerships that's really important to Olin is what we call the BOW collaboration. And this consists of 3 different colleges, so Olin College of Engineering, as well as Babson College, which is a highly regarded entrepreneurship and business school, which is right next door to Olin. And then Wellesley College, which is one of the world's top women's liberal arts colleges, which is about 1.5 miles down the road from Olin. And we do provide transportation that takes students to all 3 campuses. And how this partnership works is that students from any of these colleges has the opportunity to take classes as well as participate in clubs and activities at the other 2 colleges. So this really allows us to have this very intentional engineering community here at Olin, while also having our students be able to be part of a wider academic and social network. All right, so we talked about that engineering for good mission. We're gonna get more into how we try to carry that mission out on a daily basis through our work at Olin. And I think there's a few main ways that we try to do that. The first is through our emphasis on undergraduate teaching and learning in a small supportive community. So we talked about earlier how Olin is really, really small, about 330 students. And we also are undergraduate only, meaning that every student at Olin is working towards their 4-year bachelor's degree in engineering. So although our students do go on to pursue master's degrees and PhDs, we don't actually offer that here at Olin. And that's a very intentional choice that we've made, which has to do with the kind of learning environment and culture that we want to create here. And we want that environment to be one where you know not only your peers, but also your professors really, really well, where you're on a first name basis with them and you really have an understanding of who they are and vice versa. And that means that whether you're in the classroom or outside of the classroom, this applies to things like research opportunities, where even as a first-year college student, you have the opportunity to do some very high-level research alongside professors because you're not competing against, you know, hundreds or thousands of other students or more experienced graduate students for a limited number of opportunities. This means that you really have the support of your peers and your professors to really reach your full potential and be the best engineering student that you can be. I'd also like to point out our curriculum, which is rooted in teamwork, project-based learning, and practical skills. And when we say project-based learning, we don't just mean where, you know, you're maybe given a list of lab instructions and you're following that list to get to the right answer, you know, after you've already done the real learning and taken the test in a class that you're learning. We really mean that projects aren't kind of tacked on to the end of the learning process at Olin. They really take a front and center role in what it means to learn. And it's not just focused on going through the motions to get the right answers. It's really about starting with the questions themselves and diving deeply into those questions from a variety of different lenses and perspectives. This also means doing this in teams. So you'll see teamwork is a big part of this. The reason for that is that research tells us that when we do this work in groups, and specifically in groups that are diverse, the work that we produce is better. And the last thing I'll point out is that our approach to engineering is also highly multidisciplinary, and it's complemented by design, arts, humanities, social sciences, and entrepreneurship. And what I think is really incredible about Olin is that we don't just see these as sort of nice add-ons to our engineering curriculum. We truly see them as fundamental parts of what make you a better engineer. So you're going to see them a lot more integrated and interwoven into that curriculum from the beginning and throughout the 4 years at Olin. All right, so at this point, what I would like to do, I've talked a little bit high level about what Olin's about and how we try to, you know, put that into practice. I'd like to turn it over to Olivia Jo to kind of talk to you about what that experience and community feels like as an actual Olin student.
Hello, everyone. So first thing I want to talk about is some of the clubs on campus, and particularly Olin Fire Arts Club. So Olin Fire Arts Club is a fire spinning and performing club, and one of my favorite things about it is it's an entirely student-run club. Everything from our performances and our choreography to everything safety related. And I really enjoy it because even though we are an engineering school, it's a fun way to mix in like creativity and dance, but also engineering because we are building our props. And it's just a really fun challenge of constantly learning new tricks and making everything like effortless, but also, you know, getting to have some fun and dance. Another wonderful part about the community is fomencement. Next slide. So, like many other schools, you know, throughout the country, Olin had to move remote for the end of spring semester. And we knew that this meant we probably weren't going to be able to come back to campus before, you know, the end of the year. And we wanted to hold our commencement because we wanted to celebrate our seniors. So within 48 hours of hearing this news that we had to go home, as a community, we built origami graduation caps. We made gowns out of garbage bags, tassels out of yarn. People were decorating the entire area with chalk drawings. And it was just, you know, a way for us as a community to celebrate our seniors, even though we wouldn't be able to do it together at the end of the year. We were able to do it now. And it was just really wonderful. You know, the entire community was contributing to it. And it was a nice little goodbye for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia Jo. Yeah, I agree that the fomencement was such a beautiful experience, and I think just really embodied kind of like what that Olin community feels like. I mean, people say all the time that regardless of how they got interested in Olin, what really kind of sealed the deal for them was the people here in that community. So thank you for sharing that. All right. So we're going to get more into the nuts and bolts of the actual curriculum at this point, starting with the majors that we offer. So at Olin, we offer 3 different majors, which are mechanical engineering, electrical and computer engineering, and an engineering degree plus an area of concentration. And for that major, there are different concentrations students can choose from, which include design, computing, and computing is kind of like Olin's version of a computer science degree. It's quite different from a traditional computer science where, again, it's a lot more multidisciplinary or connected to these other fields of engineering. There's also a robotics concentration option and bioengineering, as well as a self-designed option. So for a student who may have a particular interest that they don't see reflected in these choices, they may have the opportunity to work with a professor to essentially create their own major. All right, and while I think it is important to share with you our list of majors, I think it's equally important to emphasize that we do not expect that a student who's first applying to Olin or coming to Olin to already have picked out what major they want to do. That process actually comes quite a bit later. So I'd also like to share with you our curricular streams. And what we mean by curricular streams is simply that we have put a lot of thought and planning, not only into what you're learning at Olin, but also when and how you're learning it. Starting with the very first semester. So this top row of boxes that you see here essentially represents the first semester of classes that an Olin student would take, regardless of what major they ultimately end up in. Everyone is starting with a common foundation where they're all taking Intro to Sensors, Instrumentation, and Measurement, which is essentially an introduction to how to look at the world around us and gather and collect and then analyze and utilize data in a variety of different scientific contexts. So there's a lot of electrical engineering as part of that, working with circuits and sensors and things like that. Students also take modeling and simulation of the physical world, which teaches them how to mathematically map and model the world around them. So that class involves a lot of math, a lot of computer science, and so on. And then students also take design nature, which is essentially an introduction to mechanical prototyping and engineering design. And then this fourth box that you see here that says Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences Foundation, that's not one specific class, but rather a category of different classes that students can choose from. And now when you see or hear these course names, a student might be thinking to themselves, you know, this doesn't really sound like what I would expect to be taking in my first year of an engineering school. And I think that that observation is incredibly important because I think it really gets at the heart of what makes Olin different. So at a more sort of conventional engineering school, it typically starts with about 2 years of what I call a math and science boot camp, where students are taking large lecture-based courses in all those fundamental areas that we know are important to engineering. Things like math, so calculus, linear algebra, and so on. Things like several different kinds of physics. Probably some of the other hard sciences like biology, chemistry, etc. And then maybe starting in the junior year is when they would shift more towards that applied engineering coursework. And what we're doing at Olin is, instead of saying to you, we want you to learn the really important stuff first, and then in a few years, we'll teach you what it means and how to use it, we're saying we want you to start doing something first. And through the process of doing, our hope and expectation is that you will learn all of the same content areas that you would at another engineering school. So that would be all those things I mentioned, where you're getting the electrical engineering, the circuitry work, you're getting the computer science, the mathematics, you're getting the mechanical prototyping and the engineering design. But you're doing it in this highly integrated way because that's really how the world looks, right? The things that interest and concern us about the world around us can't be placed into these neat little buckets of math, science, history, psychology, and so on. Everything is super interconnected, and we want to teach you to approach the world in that manner from day one. Now, at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to Olivia Jo to actually kind of zoom in on two of these first semester courses to give you a sense of what they kind of look like on the student level.
So the first class I'm going to talk about is Design Nature. So Design Nature is your first year design course, and throughout the course, you're designing different devices with bio-inspiration. So this project here is our hopper project, and we're creating a device that hops based off a bug, an animal, whatever you choose. And throughout this project, you're mixing in physics with this mechanical system, because you do need to do the calculations. How high is it going to jump? In which, is it going to spin? Is it going to, stay super stationary? But you're also going through, a whole bunch of prototyping and iteration phases. Is it going right? Do you have to take a step back? You're going through design reviews and presenting to panels of professors, defending your ideas and your concepts. And it's a really great experience to already be getting your first year. And that's something that I know I'm gonna, be doing throughout the industry. The next course I want to talk about is the Introduction to Sensors, Instrumentation Measurement, also known as ISIM. And the way ISIM is set up is really just a series of labs. Each week we would build a different circuit, and instead of lecturing, our professors just kind of walk around the classroom, helping us as we go throughout the project, or helping us. Oftentimes we're helping each other. And that really helps concept sticks, because you're able to experiment and swap things out to see the results. If I make this a little stronger, if I, skip over this bit, you can actually see the results, and you're getting to experiment. And now if you change this value, what the result's going to be. And that really helps those concepts stay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Olivia Jo. Okay. So then after that first semester, students are no longer taking all the same classes together. They do continue to have, they have more choice and flexibility in what they're taking, but they do continue to take classes in what we call the engineering core. So making sure they're getting those rigorous engineering fundamentals, taking design-oriented courses, as well as arts, humanities, social sciences, and entrepreneurship courses. And students may not declare or pick out their major until at earliest partway through their sophomore year. All right, so we've talked quite a bit about the beginning of the Olin experience, or laying that groundwork. I want to time travel and fast forward a little bit to the senior year. So I promised that sophomore and junior year, they happen, they're great. But the reason I want to talk about senior year for a second is to point out that in the senior year, all Olin students complete a year-long capstone project where they're actually taking what they have learned and they are partnering with an external company or organization on a significant year-long project to kind of cap off their Olin education. And to be quite honest with you, Olin didn't invent this type of project. I think there are several other colleges that offer a senior thesis or a senior project, something like that, where they're working with you on all the same skills that we are, things like teamwork, communication, open-ended projects, and so on. The difference that I see is that because Olin students have been working on these types of extended, collaborative, applied, multidisciplinary engineering projects from day one, from those courses like Design Nature and Intro to Sensors, Instrumentation and Measurement, by the time they're seniors, they're really able to take those projects to levels of sophistication and real world impact that we don't always see in other engineering programs. All right, so the last section that I'm going to share with you before we get to the Q&A has to do with the admission and financial aid process. So if you are interested in applying to Olin, I want to give you a sense of what to expect. So as you may have gathered by now, Olin is not a particularly conventional engineering school, and our application process definitely reflects that. So it's a little bit unique, and it's actually a two-phase admission process. So the first phase, which is everything that you see on the screen right now for part one, actually is pretty conventional. This is very similar to what other colleges may ask you to do. So for part one, we're looking at your application, and we accept either the common application or the coalition. We don't have a preference for one over the other. They are simply different application platforms that allow you to apply to a bunch of different colleges at once. And whichever one you choose, they're both going to include some essays. So they'll include a personal statement, which you'll probably be sending to all your colleges, as well as 2 Olin-specific essays. And we take those really seriously because that's your opportunity to help us get to know you in your own words and in your own voice. So that's really, really helpful for us. All right, we're also going to look at your transcript. We want to see what kinds of classes you've taken and how you've done in those classes. And we do require that students take both physics and calculus, either in their senior year while they're applying or at some other time or way. Beyond physics and calculus, we don't have other really strict course requirements because we know that everyone's educational path has been different. Schools are different, some students are homeschooled, the types of classes offered, the resources and opportunities, what those classes are called, can vary really widely. So instead what we're looking at is to see in your specific educational context, have you really made an effort to challenge yourself and take full advantage of the opportunities available to you? In terms of testing, this is an important one for this year because typically we do require that students submit either the ACT or the SAT. Now, for this upcoming year, if you are applying to Olin this year, we have temporarily suspended that requirement due to the pandemic. So if you're applying this year, it is completely optional. If you want to submit an SAT or ACT or any other kind of test scores, you may, and we will consider it. But if for whatever reason you can't or you don't want to, and you do not have to give a reason, it is not held against you. It does not disadvantage you in any way. And then lastly, recommendations. So we require 3 recommendations, 1 from a counselor and 2 from classroom teachers, one of which really should be a core math or science teacher, and the other can be a core academic teacher of a subject of your choosing. So it could be math or science, but does not have to be. And the deadline for all of this is January 1st. So whereas some colleges have early application options or multiple deadlines, Olin just have 1. And the reason for that is because we have that second phase that I mentioned earlier. So let's talk about that now, because that's the part that's more unique to Olin. And that is what we call our candidates weekend. So how this works is when the applications come into us from phase 1, we review them and we invite a subset of the students who have applied to come on to phase 2 or candidates weekend. So not every student who applies will be invited, but if they are invited, this is a required step of the process. Now, how this works is that in a typical year, a student would come to our campus for one of these 3 weekends. This year, due to the pandemic, there's a high likelihood that this will need to be a virtual program. But that's okay because we have some really clear goals for the program, and that's what we would really focus in on if we needed to put this into a virtual format. Now, as for what those goals are, there are 2 parts of Candidates Weekend that we evaluate. So all students will do a short interview, and they'll also do a group exercise at Candidates Weekend. And I want to focus in on that group exercise for a minute, because it's really different from what I think I originally thought of when I first heard about it. So I want to emphasize that the group exercise is totally non-technical. We're not going to ask you to build a robot or solve a math problem or anything like that. We have already looked at your academic qualifications back in phase 1. And more importantly, we do not have any expectation or requirement that you're coming into Olin with any specific prior engineering or technical background. So that's not actually what we're looking at. Instead, what we're looking at is the skills and qualities that we know make someone really happy and successful at Olin. So when you think about everything we've discussed about Olin, things like teamwork, super important here, right? Because so much of our curriculum is based around group projects. So we want to see sort of how you behave in a team setting. What do you contribute in a group? We also want to see things like, how do open-ended projects and problems feel for you? For the group exercise, there's not going to be a right or wrong answer. How does that feel for you? How do you ask questions? How do you use your resources? Those are the kinds of things we're trying to get a feel for. Now, the rest of Candidates Weekend is no longer about us evaluating you, it's more about you evaluating us. And what I mean by that is that applying to college is a two-way street, right? Yes, of course, it's easy to understand how you're sending off your applications and colleges are making decisions about them, but the opposite is just as true. We want to give you all the information you need to decide for yourself whether or not Olin is the place for you to learn and grow for the next 4 years. So we'll have things like opportunities for you to interact with our students, meet our professors, see what learning at Olin is like, talk with our staff, and give you lots and lots of exposure to the Olin community so that you can make the best decision for yourself. All right, and then very similar to admission, hand in hand with that is the financial aid process. So I want to share this with you, and at this point, the main thing I want to get across to you has to do with this cost of attendance. Because I think that for me, when I was in high school, if I had seen that a first year cost of attendance for Olin was over $76,000, a part of me would have really shut down because I would have known that I didn't have $76,000 to pay for my first year of college. So I want to be very clear with you about what this number represents and what it does not represent. So as for what it does represent, you can see kind of the breakdown of it here. This is also on our website. So this really is a holistic picture of not just your tuition or your classes, but really everything that it takes to be a student and a person while you're in college at Olin. So that will include things like your food, that will include things like your dorm, because we do require students live on campus for 4 years. It will include all of those things and more. Essentially, this represents the value of an Olin education. This is what it costs on our end to educate a student here for 1 year. What this number does not represent, however, is what you actually pay to come to Olin, or for that matter, what anyone pays. So when looking at college affordability, of course you want to look at the cost, and you also want to think very clearly about the value or what you're getting for that cost, but it's also important to consider the financial aid. And at Olin, we have 2 forms of financial aid. The first is the Olin Tuition Scholarship, which is a scholarship awarded to every single student. Just by being admitted to Olin, every student gets this scholarship and it covers half of their tuition charge for all 8 semesters or 4 years of study. And in addition to that, we also have a commitment to meet 100% of students' demonstrated financial need through the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid, which students use to apply for financial aid, not just at Olin, but really most US colleges. And it's typically US citizens and permanent residents who are eligible to complete the FAFSA. And we use that to make sure that the financial aid we offer you, that it meets your entire financial need based on your personal financial situation. And the reason for this is that, we've asked you not just to fill out an application, but also to do this whole Candidates Weekend thing. And then you got in and then you decided, yes, Olin is the place for me after thinking about it. We want to make sure finances aren't then going to be the barrier for you actually showing up in the fall. So we're trying to be as affordable and accessible as possible. Okay, so that's all I have in terms of the presentation. You can see here how to get in touch with us, as well as where to find more virtual opportunities to learn about Olin and all of our various social media. So we encourage you to continue learning about us, continue connecting with us. This was a very short time, so there's definitely a lot more that we would love to talk with you about. But at this time, we've got about 15 minutes. So I am going to ask Dan to kind of read out the questions. You can keep putting in your questions into the Q&A. Dan will share some of those with us, so you can ask questions to me and or to Olivia Jo as well.
We have one question that I think is really pertinent, and the question says, I am taking classes at a community college in my senior year of high school. Would Olin accept any credit for my STEM classes that I take at that school?
Thank you. That's a really great question. So the short answer to that is no. So Olin does not award credit for things like classes taken at a community college. The same goes for things like AP credits, IB credits, etc. And the reason for that is because the way our curriculum is structured at Olin, where it is so multidisciplinary, there's no way for us to make a one-to-one equivalency between a class that you've taken elsewhere and an Olin class. So for example, if someone takes a calculus class at their local community college, we don't have a class at Olin that simply equates to calculus. We do teach calculus, but it is integrated into the curriculum in a few different ways. And moreover, we've put a lot of intention into the 4-year sort of structure of Olin and how that curriculum builds on itself. So it really doesn't benefit a student to kind of go outside of that like intentional 4-year plan. Now, that said, what I do not want anyone to take away from this is like, why have I taken all these hard classes in high school? You know, the Olin lady said that it was useless and I've wasted my time, you know, studying for these classes or, you know, whatever. That is not the case at all. So on the admission side of things, when we're reviewing applications, we absolutely like to see that you have taken those challenging courses when and if you've had the opportunity, because we know that that A, shows that you can challenge yourself, and B, also shows that you're simply more prepared for the rigors of college level work. So it absolutely is beneficial and makes a difference when we're reviewing applications for admission, but we do not actually award credit for the reasons that I mentioned.
Thank you for that. That's a great answer. A question came in here, and I believe you went over this, but maybe you can expand on it some. How important are calculus and physics grades in the admission process?
Yeah, that's another great question. So our requirements for physics and calculus are simply that students have taken it. So when we're looking at the types of courses that you've taken during high school, we do require that you've had or are currently taking some form of physics or calculus, because that is something that is very correlated to being successful at Olin. Now, in terms of the grades of that, grades definitely do matter. I'd be lying to you if they don't, if I said that they don't. However, I also want to point out that we have what we call a holistic admission review. And what that means is that we don't like plug your GPA or your grades or your test scores, if you choose to submit them, into like some kind of formula, and then it pops out an answer of whether or not you get admitted. The holistic review means that the first question we're going to ask ourselves is, do you have the academic background and preparation to be successful at Olin? And as part of that, we're going to look at things like your essays, the kinds of things that you care about, how you learn, your recommendations, what your teachers have to say about you, what you've been involved in outside of school, your personal sort of context and circumstances. We're going to look at all those aspects of your application when making a decision. So yes, grades are a very important part of that, but it is also not the only piece of the puzzle.
Awesome. This is another good question here. Do you have, and certainly our current situation may change some of this, but do you have any international or study abroad opportunities?
Yeah, we do. So I can share a little bit about that, and then maybe Olivia Jo, if you've had friends that maybe have done that, you can jump in as well. So we do have a robust study away program. We call it study away as opposed to study abroad because it's a little bit more, encompasses some different things here. So it does encompass like a traditional study abroad where you're going to a different country to study, but we've also had students study away at other colleges here in the US as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities. We have a pretty high proportion for engineering schools of students who do study away. So compared with other engineering schools, sometimes it can be really hard for engineering students to fit in a study abroad with their requirements. So although we always want to have even more students study abroad, we do have a comparatively quite high number of students who do that. So if it's something that you think you might be interested in, it does take planning as with anything that you may want to do. So it's something that's worth talking with your advisor about, you know, when you get to Olin. But if it's a goal that you have and you plan for it, it is absolutely a realistic possibility. And in terms of the types of opportunities, they kind of depend on your situation and what your goals are. Anything from like, you know, if you're just sort of like, hey, I want to go somewhere cool and learn some new things and see some new things, but I don't have really specific goals around that. There are some super structured programs where you don't have to put in as much planning to have a cool opportunity. If you have more really specific goals of where you want to go or what you want to study, you're going to have to put in more effort to plan for the kind of experience that you want to have. But there's a range of opportunities available, and we do have a dedicated staff member here at Olin who helps students get ready for that process and work their way through it. It's a great question. Olivia Jo, do you have any friends who have studied abroad?
I do. I am looking and planning on studying abroad if the world will let me. But, you know, I've had friends who go everywhere from, you know, Europe, Ireland, Spain, also Singapore. One really interesting one that we have available to us at Olin is sea semester, to spend the entire semester on a boat, you know, traveling around, doing stuff there. So that's why it's also study away, because it's not, sometimes, you know, you're on a boat, you're not in a specific country. But yeah, definitely something you can fit into your like engineering schedule, which is really nice.
And it's typically a semester during the junior year. There's some exceptions to that, but that's most common in terms of like when a student would study away.
All right, another question here is, how does Olin prepare and support their students when searching for internships and job opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we didn't have time to put this into the presentation itself, but I'm actually going to reshare my screen because I have some information about that to share with you. So the short answer is there's a lot of support for things like research and internships and job opportunities. And I think a lot of that has to do with our postgraduate planning office at Olin. So postgraduate planning is kind of like the equivalent of a career services office at other colleges. But they call themselves postgraduate planning because they're not just focused on just getting a job in a very narrow sense, but all the kinds of things that students might want to do, whether it's graduate school, research fellowships, et cetera, et cetera. And I think why they're able to be so impactful with students is because we are so small that they're not just working with the graduating seniors who like need a job right now. They're able to work with students starting in that very first semester when they first get here and they're just starting this experience and they don't even, you know, maybe know what they want to do or what their interests are. And they work with them for a long time. So I'll share a couple of sort of outcomes of what that looks like for our students. Going over our capstone information here. Okay, so in terms of research and internships, like I said, they're able to work with students very early on. So a very comparatively high proportion of our students, or 65% of them, do a technical internship or research opportunity in their very first summer of college. So that's very early compared with other engineering schools. And then by the time students graduate, of our 2019 graduates, for 100% of them did at least one of those opportunities. And the vast majority, 97%, were able to fit in 2 or more. So there's a lot of support for doing that. And I think being able to do more than one is cool because you can try on different things, like maybe try on, you know, working with a small startup or a nonprofit, and then try working with a big company or doing research at a university, so that you can kind of get a feel for, you know, what you like and what you don't like, because it might surprise you. And then when students graduate, there's a ton of support for that too. So in terms of going on to graduate school, our students do that at very high rates as well. And all these logos that we have on these slides are like, we didn't just pick and choose them randomly. These really are by the numbers, the top graduate schools and companies our students work with. So 31% of our students go on to graduate school. The majority in the STEM areas like engineering, computer science, medical fields, but also 30% in non-STEM areas. And I think that speaks to that multidisciplinary approach to engineering, where we have students who are pursuing things like law, pursuing education, business, lots of different things. And then of course, employment. So, yeah, you want to look at things like the average starting salary, which for Olin is currently over $88,000. But I love to see things like this, like 114 companies recruited on campus in one school year, because that's more than the number of graduating seniors that we have in a school year. So it's like, people are excited about what's happening at Olin. They want to come on campus and engage with our students for those opportunities, which I think is really, really cool to see. I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'll ask Olivia Jo to jump in on that too, to like talk about experiences with that as well.
Oh yeah, PGP has been absolutely lovely. Yeah, starting in your first year, they actually will come to your classes and they're holding resume workshops, and they actually hold an entire practice career fair for first year students. We're given a list of companies that are especially, ready to hire first year students, which is why so many first year students are able to do something their first year. Yeah, like I had myself and classmates were getting summer internship offers already in October. We'd only been in college for 2 months, but they know what Olin does like for their students, and they already trust us to be working for them, which is really awesome and exciting.
Awesome, thanks Olivia Jo. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions perhaps. Anything else, Dan?
Yeah, we have one more here. I'll ask them both because we just had one pop in and then I'll be done. The first, are SAT subject tests considered at all? And the second, do you have on-campus housing for all 4 years?
Great questions. So I'll cover the first one, and that's in terms of the testing. So when we said earlier that for this cycle specifically, in a typical year, we require either the regular ACT or the regular SAT. This year it is completely optional, and that applies to any other testing. So if you want to send us things like an SAT subject test or like AP scores, you can pick and choose any kind of test score you want to send us or don't. When we say it's optional, we mean it. We are not joking with you in any way. So if you have taken an SAT subject test and you want us to see that, send it to us and we will consider it. But we won't blink an eye if you don't have that. We won't think you're at a disadvantage or anything like that. And in terms of the housing, the short answer is yes, but I'll let Olivia Jo speak to that.
Yep, all students live on campus for all 4 years. We have 2 dorm halls, so I really like that everyone lives on campus for all 4 years, because it really creates a culture of stuff's always happening on campus. It's never like, oh, you have to go off campus to find out what's going on. Something's always happening, no matter what time of day or night it is. I remember, like just singing sea shanties in the middle of the field with seniors on, in the middle of the night, and just having everyone on campus, really nice. Always something happening.
Yeah, I mean, Olin's a small school, so I think it just helps to create that really intentional community where you feel like you're getting that like more quote unquote traditional college experience, simply because everyone's living near each other and working together on projects. That learning doesn't just happen inside, class hours and things like that. And personally, I think it's really telling that like we're a really small school. I was super surprised to find out that the #1 complaint that we get from our first year students is not that there's like not enough to do or they're bored, but that there's too much to do. And they like, it takes time to adjust to like, I want to do everything. How do I like, find a good balance that works for me? So I think that really speaks to how like vibrant the community is.
Oh yeah, I can second that. That's definitely was the biggest thing was, we get very busy, which I don't think you mentioned. First semester at Olin is pass no record, which allows, it's like basically, pass fail. So it allows students to sign up for 1,000,002 clubs and figure out how to adjust to college and figure out, what things you want to be doing a little bit during your college life. And but still, even with that, you're just super busy and there's always something going on that you want to be a part of.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, Dan, are there any last questions or thoughts?
Nope, that is all that is in right now. We were able to answer all of them.
Awesome, that's great. And like we said, email us if you have other questions. We want to keep talking with you and engaging with you. So thank you all so much for coming and asking great questions.
And thank you to the Olin team for being here and sharing your time with us and this valuable knowledge. And as Alia said, the conversation does not stop here, and we will be sure that they get your contact information after this. So as you exit the Zoom webinar, you will be taken to a quick survey. It's only 4 questions, so we'd love to hear your feedback regarding this particular session. And there's more sessions available through tomorrow evening. And check back on our website for recordings to view sessions in an on-demand setting. So I hope everyone has a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and are staying happy and healthy out there. And thanks again so much to the Olin team, and have a great day.